I wanted to open with the fact that I caught this news earlier today. Let's zoom in a little bit. Tough day when everyone you work with directly, including your managers, laid off. Excuse me, had their roles reduced, and you're asked to onboard their replacements. People told to take those very same roles just in a different country who are not any happier about it. I suspect I'll be taking Akio, I guess the dog or cat, on extra long walks for the time being. Well, I looked this up. This is Google happening here, and some of y'all may have noticed in the news. And the individual we're talking about here is a release manager for Python. Python, the programming language, Python from the Software Foundation, the Python Software Foundation. So I was a little startled to see that in the news, and I went and started doing a little more digging to find out what are the details. The information's a little thin on that, but I got another tab here. I looked up. There's some assertions being made about it's for cheap labor or something. What I can glean is the team taking over is apparently in Munich. What's a little fuzzy is I don't know if the original people are laid off. Are they actually laid off? Are they being reassigned to other teams? What does this spell? Is this trouble for Google? Is this trouble for Python? Is this what's coming down here? It seems pretty a little rough here. And what I want to talk about on the Pro Coder Show is there something like this going to happen to you? What are the things you can do to hedge against this? I mean, is there really safety in the tech industry? Maybe you entered this arena, this field, with the idea that, hey, this is a solid job. People have told me there's always going to be room for developers. So what does this mean for me as a pro coder getting into the industry? And that's what I want to talk about today. They're trying to drive all these different tabs here. Okay. So one of the things is, again, I want to point out, we haven't, apparently in none of the news sources this is based on, we've got a social media posting from somebody on the team. I don't think Google themselves have directly commented on it. There have been other news reports earlier this month from Google about other teams being other people, teams, et cetera, being laid off. And it's no surprise that the tech sector has been undergoing some major contractions and crunches, at least in the past 12 months. We've seen layoff reports from the big shops, from the Facebooks, the Googles, Netflixes, what have you, Microsoft. There have been swath layoffs, whatever. I've already shared my story of where I got cut in the acquisition, whatever, and I've moved over to Cockroach Labs. But so it is a rough ride. And the thing is, what's some of the stuff you can do to weather the storm on that front? And one of the things is, we need to come out and say it. There really is there's no such thing as a safe job, if you will. Okay. There's always a chance that priorities change. There's shops get bought out. I'm not saying Google got bought out, but Google can have, new management comes in, new board officers take over, people retire. Companies are people, okay? Companies are essentially made of people. So you may have an existing set of staff with some amount of turnover, but new management comes in. They want to go in a different direction. We're also seeing new markets emerge. For example, all the AI stuff. This is where people are questioning. There's a lot of speculation on what's the deal with Google. I thought Python was one of the key toolkits being used in AI. Well, it's not that clear cut, okay? For things like AI, Python offers a key feature, something that the inventor of TCL, Tickle, Tool Command Language, is that the name for it, was hoping to do, was to create a higher level language that could bind to C or C++ libraries below and make it easier to leverage technologies. That was what the designer of TCL wanted to do, and didn't succeed, I dare say. It was possible, but I didn't run into people that used it that way. Python did achieve that. There are a lot of libraries, a lot of scientific libraries, data analysis, vector, matrix algebras. NumPy is a very well-known library for doing numerical stuff, which basically you're getting access to the high-speed C++ libraries under the hood, and Python gives you a high-level interface to hook into it and play with it like a toy, whatever. So people are able to use Python to go do proof of concepts. Let's go try this out. Let's see how far we can get. Let's tinker with it. And I don't want to fiddle with compile time stuff or building C apps necessarily. I've got a friend of mine who's just down the road where he lives, works in video editing. He's a C, C++, and Rust all the time. And I enjoy listening to his stories of the kind of battles he has to fight. And some of them I keep thinking, would that battle be easier if you had a higher level language like Python at your hands? So AI isn't just in Python or just in C. I frankly I haven't worked in C code for a long time, so I don't know what today's efforts would be. So I would be left in the dust on that front. But we're also seeing AI emerge in the Java space. And if you just go look at Spring AI, that's a hot topic. Josh Long interviewed in an hour and a half stream a few weeks ago, Jürgen Haller and Rod Johnson. And one thing Rod Johnson commented about in the AI front was this is something he'd come back to actually start doing some AI research and coding on an app. And he was using Spring to do that in Spring AI. So that sounds pretty cool. So my point in all this stuff is that the AI revolution that we're all witnessing and seeing is spreading into all kinds of markets we didn't predict. We did predict it, but we're seeing the AI. This is, I mean, you call it the AI revolution, call it what you want, but it's a new technology. A lot of startups are wanting to get their hands on it to say, is this something we can get a multiple of leverage out of if we get into the AI stuff? And I'm going to take my glasses off so I don't have all the glare shining back in your face. But, what's the deal on all this stuff? So, so people are wanting to know what's Google's position on AI? Where's that going? But that is what I want to talk to, is that that is hot news. And to be a pro coder, you need to be paying attention to the news to see what's going on, because there's a direct first order effect to that. But I want to plant a thought in your mind that, I want to help give you some of the things that I think about when I read the news. Not only do I think about the first order effects, but something, if you're going to make this your career, if you're going to be a pro coder, I want you to also be thinking long range. There's a person that one time commented about, you need to think about long term. And this was a person who was originally educated as a forester. So he said that he thought in ranges of like 70 years. I'm not asking you to think in the terms of 70 years, but let's think past this year, or this month, or this year, the next 18 months. And instead, let me think on a longer time range about what's this kind of thing to do. So what is some of the stuff that you can do to try to hedge against this kind of stuff? Because the thing is, I have to tell you, there may be the AI revolution, but there may be something else that's going to come after that, and something else after that. And we can't afford to let ourselves be buffeted by every news item that comes out there.
If you're enjoying the show, give it a big thumbs up and share it with a friend right now.
Now, one of the sources of inspiration that I want to hand you with is something I saw from somebody else, and it's something. His name is Vlad Mihelsia. He's a Hibernate JPA consultant he's over in Romania, but he had commented several months ago that one of his best decisions he ever made was about 5 years ago, when he decided to start writing a blog article every week. Now, you can follow him on LinkedIn, you can follow him on X, what have you. I don't know about Facebook. I've been off of Facebook since last September, and that's just good for me. I can't speak for you. But he started writing a blog article every week on the stuff that he knows about, that he's an expert, a wide range. And so if you take that as about 50 articles a year over 5 years, we're talking about 250 posts. Okay. That's the kind of thing that you need to pick up and decide, I'm going to do this. This is something I can do. And I'm probably not going to see any results from this for at least 12 months. I've actually done some of the research, and to be a content creator from a blogging perspective is the number I've heard is you need to write a minimum of 100 articles to get any traction whatsoever, to have any flavor of these search engines actually finding you and bringing your content to people. Okay. And so that's he said that was one of the best decisions he made, is to go start creating content, in a sense. And I want to share with you, I started doing this, what you're enjoying right now. I kind of embarked on this back in 2019. It was late October 2019 when I decided to start doing YouTube content, because in my humble opinion, video is the future. And it's just your ability to reach people, to get your own story out there, to make your opinion known about various certain things, is a function of your investment, your willingness to go and do it and stick to it and be committed to it. And it's a function of time. So it's how much you're willing to invest in that, and just a matter of time. So part of this is what I've heard from another content creator is the time is going to pass anyway. Are you willing to spend a little extra effort to do something like that? And what happens if you succeed? What are the options if you succeed? I just used the word options there, and options is something that I heard from somebody else. The person with the most options wins. So the whole thing is if you can embark upon that, maybe you're going to make video a week. That's kind of a bigger undertaking, I would say, than a blog a week. But a blog post a week, you can write it on a site. You can use a medium.com, or you could blog it on LinkedIn. I would contend you're on rented space. But anyway, then you just start writing the material that you can share with people. And what happens down the road 2, 3, 5 years from now? Well, maybe nothing happens. Maybe it doesn't do anything for you. People may enjoy your content, but maybe you have a job with the shop and absolutely nothing wrong happens. Will you have been hurt by taking on that, by embarking on that endeavor? I don't think so. For one thing, if you start writing about stuff, it actually activates the more neurons and thinking processes, and it helps energize your thinking. So I think that alone will help you become a better pro coder, a more savvy developer, just by going through the actions of the research and the writing. You'll find your ability to go in and pitch something to a manager or to a VP or what have you will improve just by doing the exercise of that. However, what happens if you're into this endeavor, you're 3 years in, and say your company gets bought out, or they decide that they're going to prune your department and you need to go find something? Well, you may be able to find another shop, or maybe you've built up an audience that you're like, hey, this is my chance to go become an independent consultant. I've actually gotten a lot of traction. I've had people coming to me asking, would I be willing to give them advice or consulting, if you will? People begged me to come and consult for them based upon the content that I've been writing in my blog post. And that may be, having your department cut from a company may be the impetus you need to actually go down that path. I was on Thorben Janssen's podcast like a year ago, thereabouts, and we were talking about the parser that I built for Spring Data JPA. And one of the things that he had shared with me was that, he started his podcast and his book and whatnot as sort of a side thing. And the thing is, it just kept incrementally going up, building more. He reached a point where that thing took all of his time, and he left his previous job, and he was doing that. And that was something he had carved out. So it was something he absolutely loved to do, and he enjoyed that, and he was being compensated for that. Sometimes this is where stuff goes. We call it a side hustle. And I don't know, for some people that maybe that has a distasteful sound to it about, I don't like that hustle culture stuff. And, I don't. Okay, let's set semantics aside and just think about the thing like that. So if you're able to go start building something up, it's an option. An opportunity could present itself at some point. And that is, are you worse off by having the opportunity? I don't think so. The more options and opportunities you have to draw upon, the better. And so, does this build a safety net for you? No, nothing is a true safety net, but we call this hedging risk, where it's like, what actions can I take today that give me different avenues to go? And, I have to say today, it's easier than ever to sit down and create content in some form, flavor, or fashion for other people to digest. Now we can start to quibble over, well, should I write it on Medium? Should I go run a WordPress thing? Should I make a static website? And the whole thing is you can make the decision to go in and do this and not have it all figured out yet. You don't have to know how all this works. I mean, when I started making YouTube videos in 2019, did I know how to do that? Heck no, I didn't. I had to tinker with it. I had some eager ideas. I had a lot of motivation in the beginning. And part of it was I want to go outside, stand in front of my house with my dog on a leash and talk about Spring Boot. That's crazy. So, um, the saying I heard, I think it was from some movie, it's that idea was so crazy, it just might work. So, is that my full-time job? Am I a YouTuber doing it full-time? No, but not by any means. But the position that I secured at Cockroach Labs is they need content creators. The spot I found, they needed people that could create content for paying customers, and being able to we're going to have to in a few months time, we're gonna have to make some video stuff, updates and all. So I'm like, let's do it. So the skills you can accumulate, there's more than stuff than just coding. It's not just coding. There's other things we need to learn how to do, and there may be ways to leverage it. All right. So the thing I want you to just plan in the back of your mind is think about, I'm a pro coder. I'm first and foremost, I'm here to write code for somebody, or maybe, you have a certain specialty in that thing. I'm here to build web apps, or I'm here to do the data query stuff, or I'm here to secure stuff. This is what I've been taught, whether it was through a boot camp program or through, you went to a university program, or you've learned it all on YouTube. You have your initial set of skills, but I want you to start looking at a broader range and say, what else can I learn? What can I expand? Can I learn how to write documentation? Can I learn how to do releases? And what Mark was this? I forget his name. Had said in one of our previous episodes of the Pro Coder Show, it doesn't hurt you to invest in yourself. And what I want you to think about is, how much of this that I'm learning can I turn around and share with others? Because one of the things I put into 12 Rules for Pro Coders is that I think there's a certain element of responsibility we all carry, that when the time is right, we have chances. We need to start sharing it with other people. We need to produce our own content. We need to take this message. What is something that we've learned? I don't need to know everything about pro coding, but if I've learned about this one toolkit and I share it, the person over here that hasn't learned about it can benefit from that. And that's kind of how it's supposed to be. And if I do that, and maybe I go figure out a site where I'm going to write this content on, then I can take it and I can share the link to it, or just copy the content, what have you. I can go share a copy of it on LinkedIn. LinkedIn makes it easy to go bake a newsletter. So you can sit there and roll it out to the people that want to hear that and share it there. You can have an email list if you want to. I haven't even brought that up, but you can publish it out there to your subscribers and basically put in your own 2 cents. I do want to share that today's episode of the Pro Coder Show is brought to you by 12 Rules for Pro Coders. It is finally out, and it's your chance to grab it. And the lowest cost place you can find it is if you go to 12rules.io. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, it's 12rules.io. You can find it, the ebook, everywhere. It's on Amazon and like 45 other providers. And if you go to Amazon, you can also get the paperback right now. So it's out in ebook and paperback. And however, if you come to 12rules.io and buy it there, I'm still putting together the audio/video versions, and you can still buy those at a discount if you want to check that out. Now, what I want to bring in the next segment, the Meet a Pro Coder segment, is somebody that I've been corresponding with for probably 3 or 4 years is good friend Don here, and I'm going to bring in all the special effects here. To keep going. Okay. Don, welcome to the Pro Coder Show. Why don't you tell the audience who you are?
Hi, I'm Don Coffin, pro coder and close follower of Mr. Turnquist here. Purchased a couple of his publications already, and I highly recommend the 12 Rules for a pro coder. He was kind enough to give me a pre copy of it, and I got to say, I wish I had that book 50 years ago when I started writing code.
He said 50 years ago, and I'm like, what was the kind of what was the landscape like when you got into coding? Like what was that like? I can't even imagine.
Let's put it this way: I actually have a degree in Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from what was then Fresno State College, is now known as the California State University at Fresno. The only computer science course was available when I was a senior, and they taught Snowball 4, which is a Lisp-based language. My guess is most of this audience has no idea what either one of those is. My first course was a Fortran 4, and we had to write our programs on a key punch. You built up an 80-column hollow root deck, you fed it into a machine, it punched out another deck, and you then fed that in, and you got your hard copy.
Oh my gosh, that I saw somebody did a mockumentary of a coder back in the day, and it's comedic, and it shows this guy walking down a hall with a stack of punch cards like this tall, and he can't see, and he's carrying the stack, and the camera is angled so you can see there's a banana peel on the walkway, and he steps on it, and just the cards go everywhere, and it's
fortunately they were smart enough to put a sequence code in every card, so you then had to just take that deck to a sorter and resort it.
Already solving problems. Fix one problem by solve with the solution.
Yeah. Now the other languages I had, I took COBOL. Actually, was capable. We had an ICM session at the college one night, and Commander Grace Hopper, the designer developer of COBOL for the Navy, spoke. So I was able to actually see her. Very informative, very interesting individual. The last language I took was Compass, which is the CDC assembler language. At one point, we replaced that IBM machine with a control data processor throughout the California state colleges. So those were the languages I took. I guess you could call that formal. Everything else is pretty much, other than going to specific courses on hardware that I worked on, self-taught. And even today, I'm still taking Udemy and Coursera courses.
I think that's the most learnable lesson in all that, is like what we're taught is like we're given this much, but to actually be a pro coder, it's like you need to go out, you need to keep learning, you got to keep studying, and just keep expanding, because the frontier keeps expanding.
Yeah, very much so. I highly recommend. And the courses aren't expensive. If you wait, almost everybody on Udemy does a once a month sale price. Now, the price has gone up. It's gone from just under $10 to maybe $13. But when you look at it as a lifetime investment, and you can go back and look at those courses over and over, and they keep updating them. So maybe you signed up and it was a Java 8 course. Well, now that they've updated it to Java 21 because they want to keep selling it. So, and most of them come with coding examples, so you can code it. So I find it very easy to stay up on top. I've already taken some courses on AI. I'm looking at Modulif and some of the other spring courses that are coming out. So you just can't stand still. This industry never stands still. We used to have a term when I was building projects. What's the life schedule? Is that internet years or calendar years? Because there's a big difference.
Yeah, what's this? Oh, I had a thought there. I gave a talk at Austin Peay State University back in September, I think, and as I was putting the talk together, I wanted to be like, I want to get up in front of these students and I don't want to talk about my accomplishments. I want to what's something I can hand you? And I thought, the least expensive thing that we think is the most expensive is like, what if I just go buy a book? What if I go spend $15 on a book? And go imagine buying a book a year or 2 books a year. You can, for $100 a year, you can keep expanding your knowledge, and then just flip it on its head and imagine if you don't do that, but all your teammates that you're working with are doing that. So they're all moving ahead and you're just standing still. And it's like, is that really worth fighting over $100? I mean, it's really not that much to keep growing your knowledge every year.
No, it's not. And now some of those platforms are giving you annual fees, and you can look and take anything for free, basically for a one-time annual purchase.
And I think, this is part of, I think we have a kind of a message foisted upon us, which is like, just try to save every nickel, it's almost a scarcity. Like, just be careful. You watch out. Everything is every expense is a bad expense. I'm like, this is not an expense. This is an investment in yourself. And so, one of the things I'm most excited about is it looks like YouTube is on the cusp of rolling out paid for courses. Now, that may sound quirky because I think a lot of people are like, oh, not paid for courses. That sounds like a ripoff or a scam deal. And it's like, well, no, maybe if you buy a course that's how to get rich quick in 5 steps or something, that maybe that's a scam. But my hope is that the people that are coming to this channel, I can hopefully put out there the 12 rules stuff. And it's like, if you want to get it here, you can get it on the platform you're already on. And I haven't entertained whether to put it on Udemy or not, but I may have to do that because I want to, let's put the content there where people can get it. They can decide if that's the format they best consume it in.
Right. Now, my career's been interesting. I actually started out in sales right out of college in 1972. I worked for a company, I'll name it because it doesn't exist anymore, and that's the Burroughs Corporation, selling a electronic posting machine. It was a computerized ledger card system about the size of probably the desk you're sitting at. And it sounds like sales. Well, how'd you get into programming? Well, unfortunately, in that era, when you were a territory manager, you not only sold it, you had to maintain it. So when a customer said, hey, that application I purchased, I need you to make modifications, I didn't have a group of programmers I could send in an issue and say, I need this capability, and go through all of the agile types of things you do today and justify it. I'd actually go code it. Now, would I have to code it in? I actually had to code it in machine language. I had to get down and understand what those hex codes stood for. There
Wow.
was a compiler capability, but we didn't have it in the field. And how do we save those programs? You're like this. This is a magnetized ledger strip where the data is being kept, right?
Wow.
Put the program on it and give them a deck of ledger cards and say, don't post to this. This is your program. If you got really lucky, you managed to punch it out in a long Mylar tape, but that was very rare. So I did that. Like you asked, what was it like? Nothing like you know of today.
Feels like you're building it with sticks and rocks to pull it together, but it's like you've got, and it seems almost like in every generation, well, this is what we got, but I need to do this. So who's filling the gap in? You are, because I think where I went to grad school, I had to write code, and they didn't have version control there, but nobody had told me about version control, but I was like, I would sit there and wreck the code. Like on a given day, I'd wreck the code, and I had to go undo that. I had to go retrace my steps. So the next day, instead of writing new code, I started like, I'm going to go make a clone copy of this folder. So I've got to, if I wreck it, I can just back up to yesterday's copy. And there's version control invented out of this blue.
Yeah. No, it was interesting. You talked about having connections and so forth. So I did that for about a year and a half, and I didn't like the cold call portion of it. They also made you have to sell calculators, which wasn't all that exciting. They weren't priced well enough to be an easy sale. The way you did it is you threw it in free on top of the computer price. But I had met a gentleman when I was going to college who actually had a photographic memory. He took that first IBM machine that I mentioned and would study the engineering maintenance manuals at night. He would then go in and patch the operating system, unbeknownst to the IBM engineer, and get the computer to do what he wanted it to do. He turned it into a typewriter, actually. So I contacted him. I went to work for a savings and loan in where I lived that actually was the early SaaS. Not only did they run their own savings and loan, they ran others in the system. And I got hired to actually write code for what were terminals, not a computer that you know today, but dedicated hard processors.
Wow.
And so I did that. The one that I did, and this was very successful. I had a customer in Northern California that wanted us to go to an IBM 3600, which is a system it had a gas panel. It didn't have a CRT screen, but it had a gas panel. And you could
Wow.
actually design the interface in the gas panel to where it looked like a CRT. Now, at the same time, this same individual had written a IBM 3270 CRT handler. So I had somebody who knew how to do UI, and we managed to sell that system to the point that I had the largest IBM network in the US for a while. And we had about 25% of the then savings and loans in California. So it was interesting. I was getting trained on ATMs and other things. And one day I met the engineering manager responsible for the microcode. Think of it as a JVM. It wasn't. It's the predecessor to a JVM virtual machine. It would interpret it would compile into a language, which this microprocessor then read and actually executed the instructions. And they had this bug. And at the time, believe me, you never do this again. They were shipping the microcode source code with the object. So I was debugging it one night and figured out, oh, this is the fix, and I fixed it. So I met him at one of the IBM training schools I was at, actually back where I live now in Atlanta, and I told him about the bug. Well, he fixed it and stopped shipping the microcode.
Don't show them up. Come on, man. You're part of the big blue, or contractors thereof.
Yeah. It was interesting because that individual then left the service bureau and for a startup out of Washington, state of Washington, that formed an interesting computer system. It was actually built on an Intel 8008 microprocessor, which ultimately went to an 8080. But it was a self-contained card. So you have this box with 4 cards. Each one's tied to a CRT and a keyboard, and they are independent computers. He asked me to join while it was still a startup, and at the time I was moving up in the management line. I said no. Well, that was probably the worst mistake I ever made, because I then went to work for them. And so effectively, not just California, I was running a team that had customers in Honolulu and Colorado and throughout. I took those 3600s and replaced them with this new machine for the service bureau that I was working at. So it was interesting. Probably one of the most challenging activities I ever had, and this is going to sound kind of funny, was spending 4 months in Honolulu, converting a savings and loan to this new system. The pressure was they lost their service bureau January 1st. If the system was not up, they had no way to get any customer support. So you might think Honolulu is great. Let me tell you, inside of a data center in Honolulu looks like the inside of a data center in Hoboken, New Jersey, because you don't see the outside. It's dark when you go home, and you get to work very early. The only benefit was bars at that time in Honolulu didn't close till 4 and opened at 6 in the morning. So if you wanted to go have a drink after you left at 2 in the morning, you could go get something.
I sense that probably happened more than once based on some of the pressure working at for a financial institution like that.
Once or twice, yeah.
Once or twice. Yeah, that's the I remember having to go in for an assignment and they were like, they'd said like, we got this, task complete. I knew I was going to have to go to the server room, and I knew that the server room's AC settings were for the computers, not for the humans. So this is when I was down in Central Florida, and it's like Florida, summertime, nice and hot. I grabbed my parka coat. I had some gloves that were very thin that with the fingertips cut out. So I knew it was like I could work on the keyboard. And I said, and back then when I wore my glasses all the time, you'd step outside of the server room and they'd steam over. So
yeah. No,
you do what you got to do.
I lived in server rooms. I remember climbing under the flooring to reconnect drives when we had to do rearrange the floor. So yeah, those are good old days.
We had to do a deployment with our the first contract I ever worked on when I got out of college and worked at Harris Corporation. We had the deployment site was the Cape Canaveral Air Station telemetry building. So it's like they do all the rocket launches, but all the telemetry gear would be routed to this building, surrounded in barbed wire fence. And so we'd sent in all the racks, whatever, and I was going in to install the software, but the guy on our team that had to go run the cables and climb under the floors, the stage flooring and stuff, he went down there and he went and told me that one of the local security people had said, we're watching. We know if you straight, because apparently under the is a honeycomb vault, so all these different vaulted rooms with combination locks, but apparently underneath it all,
it's wide open.
And they tried to scare him, telling him, if you walk over to the other areas, we're going to know it. And he said to me, they don't know it, which he had clearly already walked over there. And I didn't believe that line either. So that cracked me up.
Yeah. No, what's interesting is I worked for that company for about 10 years, and then they made a change to move into the banks and went to C, not C++, but C, and another vendor. And I kind of saw the handwriting on the wall. They did not orchestrate that move well. So I went to work for a company that was very similar to what you worked with in Florida. It was a division of another computer manufacturer, who no longer manufactures. It was a CDC system. They had one customer, every Ma Bell company in the country, and they were selling a piece of hardware that was a front end. And believe me, what I learned there was Ma Bell never gets rid of anything they ever write a program for. And because I had been doing what was known as VTAM, virtual telecommunication access method, for all of this IBM stuff, I got on a project that emulated their front end machine. And if you want to look at something extremely complex, go look at that coding requirement for that standard. So at one point, I had to go to jury duty on a trial that lasted forever, and I just being vordeered trying to get on the jury. Well, when I came back, they said, "You're no longer a developer. You're going to be a maintenance guy." So I was a department of one, me, maintenance guy. That was the first time they ever added testing to a release.
Wow.
And it was, they were on the verge of losing a customer down here. Actually, it was in Alabama. And so they used to do some pretty strange things. They would get a bug report, and we had no bug tracking system. That, keep in mind, this is in the 80s. So all of the tools everybody's familiar with didn't exist. And so the first thing I said was, okay, came up with some manual handwritten instructions and said, no, we're not going to ship a tape until you go through this type of system. And then I had to spend 1 week every month for 3 years at their data center, which was, they were headquartered in another state, but their data center was in Hoover, Alabama. let me tell you, you get 1 hour to make and every time they had to have a hardware change, I had to go on site to
Oh
back
my
up and
word.
fix the software. And telephone companies are bonuses are based on uptime with a 5 or 6 decimal accuracy of 9999.
Oh wow. Yeah.
So maintenance was like, you can take this thing out of service from 2 a.m., but it's got to be back up at 3 a.m. So I started doing that at other companies. So I've been in Seattle. I actually had an issue with the original Bell Labs the weekend of Super Bowl, and they forced me to come and prove to them that it was not our bug, it was their bug, which I did fairly quickly. So we then all sat around this guy's room watching the Super Bowl.
At a certain point, you start to develop a sniffer of, okay, I'm putting out this solution, and I know what somebody's going to ask me for evidence, and you like start to gather it in advance. So you know it's almost like you could anticipate program management stuff.
Well, it was interesting because at that time we were using high-level programming. It was Cybele, which was a Pascal-based, but the compiler converted it into a Motorola 68000 machine listing. And so the first thing I went to the developers and said, I want a data area that's 3K. Well, what do you want that for? Because I'm going to patch this. You cannot patch this. Well, I had been patching systems for years. And so it was pretty easy. You'd write the code in Cybele, get it to run, and then you would translate that generated machine code into a patch area. So where the code was bad, you just do a jump, machine language jump, run the code and return. You don't do that today. It's too easy to get it fixed.
The security holes are ridiculous now.
Yeah, well, I actually knew a guy who, and this was pre my time there, they said, spent 365 days on the road. He would go fix a bug. And as he left, said, I'll be back and name a date. And sure enough, a bug popped up that date and he had to go back. Strange.
Yeah.
He was leaving bugs.
I had worked for a guy at one point in time at Harris Corporation. I think I was sort of entering the time my career started was pretty close to the end of his career. He retired soon after I last worked with him, and he had described those jump scenarios of, okay, you jump down into this other chunk of code, and then now this other code now is a little flag to signal when to jump back, and
yeah,
it's like, I can still remember the textbook. I got to study Pascal in high school, and we had the book Oh Pascal, and that's the one. And one of the chapters had all this funny still photos, and one of the chapters it shows this ma feeding her 12-year-old from a pot with a giant, here's a big fork covered in spaghetti, and these kids just. And it was like, this is what spaghetti code is, and it's like, I don't know if people today know what spaghetti code is, but all that, that's what has thus borne out the clean coding movement. Like, no more spaghetti ever again.
Yeah, well, believe me, what we now have today for people coming into the industry is nothing like what we had 50 years ago when I got started in this stuff. And you had to find ways to fix it. You didn't have a choice. You have a deadline or a customer who, in several cases, couldn't function.
So I'd like to think, though, well, we've learned a lot of lessons since then. As pro coders, we've developed stuff, we've learned, and we're able to take on new frontiers today we probably never could have gotten away with back then. The professor that I worked with in grad school, his education was, he was an agricultural engineer, because when he went to school, there was no such thing as computer science. I mean, computer science was some white papers that had been written back in the day. So, I had seen he had a simulator environment. So, whereas there was a tractor system outside his office that you could drive around in the parking lot and the steering was totally controlled by a computer, he had all the same pistons and actuators and control boards, et cetera, inside his office with, shrunk down metal pieces so we could do the same thing. And I was like, this is what a simulator really is. And
Yeah.
but now, when we were on that telecom contract I worked on for Harris Corporation, where the first time we had to go do a big system patch, and we didn't know what the uptime, and we had 5 nines of reliability requirements. We had the whole software engineering team come in and do that at like midnight.
Yeah.
And we were like making sure we had all the people in to say, okay, we're going to do this. Anybody hear any problems with that? And then somebody added up how much that cost to bill all those hours and said, okay, we need to come up with some better tools to do releases, or it's going to cost us an arm and a leg every time we do a release.
Yeah. I think portions of both of our backgrounds were very similar, doing the same kind of thing. So, but at some point I burned out of writing code. It just was too much. So what I did then is I converted to a product manager's position, taking all of that telecommunication information and turning it into productization by designing boards with digital signal processors. Those people who have now got a cell phone in their pocket running voice over IP, my hardware was used by several well-known manufacturers to support voice over IP in the early days. And so there's a theme here. Telecommunication, first in the financial industry, and then telecommunication is pure telecommunication, was what my specialty was. So I was able to leverage it from sales to programming to product marketing. And now I'm actually officially retired. But even as a retiree, I've got a part-time job with a nonprofit, coding in Java and Groovy and keeping up to date on that stuff, and acting as a technical consultant for a standard. In between those two, I tried to start a company that was a computerized thermostat. Same time that our friend's former Apple developer of the iPhone went and figured out that the design image should be a standard thermostat looking old design. I was using an iPhone kind of screen for it. And I made the mistake of forming a company and using a gentleman as the CEO that wanted to use the salesman approach to sell to OEMs, which I knew wasn't going to work. I'd been in the OEM market forever. And one of the issues that we thought we would need is a standard data format for utilities to provide data so people can analyze it. Well, it turns out about that time, the government came up with just that program, and that's the group I'm now working in nonprofit to support, although my thermostat never hit market.
Well, part of any system is not only do you have to build the system, you have to know how to sell it to the customers. And I've seen many endeavors where I don't know, as pro coders, we know the situations where the tech doesn't succeed, and that's the failure point. But sometimes we rarely don't have the insights for when the business is not the successful avenue for that.
Yeah, fortunately, I've had both sides of it, so that's a little more helpful. And it's interesting. The industry, the telephone industry went through it. We've been trying to do this in the utility industry. It is hard to move industries like that are effectively able to run all by themselves with very little change. And we're now just seeing, I've been doing this now for 10 years, and the standard is just now getting adopted for success. But I knew that was going to be the case because I'd seen the telephone industry first go from Bell, everybody's AT&T, to individuals, and then back to AT&T. So you just cannot move.
I enjoyed hearing some of the stuff like James Waters, was whatever the senior vice president over at VMware, and I remember him talking about going in and selling cloud stuff to cloud solutions to like some of these insurance companies and banks and shops that have been there for 300 years. And we'd all heard about startups disrupting the big shops, and his whole angle of attack was, let's go to the big shops and disrupt the startups. And so you're going to a very old company, maybe with very senior ranking management, and there's kids, young whippersnappers working at these shops, and they're like, let's get cloud. We can sit there and release all our tools for managing insurance contracts, and look at how much we can get to if we pick up some of these new conventions. And they'd be astonished. Hey, we save lots of money if we do this.
Yeah, no, I've got a son-in-law who's doing something similar to that, where he's working for a consulting company, and some of the savings he's telling me that these people could save using his implementation is just unbelievable. It's like, why do you even want to think about it? But they do.
I've had fun at the discovery that some of the biggest customers we have coming in on Cockroach, not all of them, but many of them are financial shops, insurance companies, what have you, and they really like SQL. SQL's this technology that we've had since the 70s, right, since Cod wrote his paper. And I've seen so many business analysts glom onto SQL. It's like SQL, to me, I've called it the first DSL. Look, business analysts can understand it. And a database engineer I worked with at Harris said it's not rocket science. It's very straightforward. It's very, eloquent, you could say, and they love SQL. And so I think I responded to somebody's Twitter comment over the weekend or whatnot. I was like, the biggest reason people may have moved away from SQL is because they needed cloud scale stuff. And it's like, if you can get SQL and you can get it at cloud scale, people will come back to it. And yeah. I feel like I'm witnessing that era emerge now, and it's kind of entertaining. It's something that I don't know, resented having to study in college. I'm like, this is now what I'm doing is my day job, and I'm enjoying it.
Things tend to come back around, yes.
But I was also shocked at the number of the business analysts would fascinate me because they're this intersection between a manager and a developer, almost a DevOps-y, like. I don't know what the DevOps equivalent of that is, not a dev operator, a dev business person, whatever. And they would they get their hands on Excel, and they could do the people that could do the pivot tables. I knew they had crossed to the other side of data analysis. And then it's like, oh, wait a minute, Excel's not enough. I'm going to go to Microsoft Access and build. And yes. It's like, they build wicked stuff with Access, and then find out Access is meant for single user only. And so they would come to us, can you turn this Access app into a real app? And I'm like, oh no.
Oh, been there, done that.
But and then I don't know. I was surprised to see we had on that telecom contract, we had one of the members of the DBA team was assigned to the software development team, so he was there to help us write queries and coach us on. He's the guy that introduced me to running explain plans, which I was like, why don't they cover this in college, showing you how the queries would actually operate and where it was wasting all your time. And then I would find out he would use Microsoft Access to manage the Oracle database tables that he was responsible for, because it had the perfect user interface that he could link his Access database to Oracle and see the data. And so when they came to him and said, fix this, fix that, he's like, okay, bloop, here you go. And cool. I enjoyed watching him retire. He retired just a few years ago, and he's the guy that taught me how to go ski in Colorado on a budget, because he went to one of the lesser known ski resorts and had figured out an entire racket for where to stay so that you didn't have to pay as much for cab fare and all that kind of stuff. So,
oh, cool.
That was perfection in my book.
Yeah.
Let's see here. We've got a big attendance. I'm glad we've got a lot of people turning up. I want to remind everybody that you can catch it here. We broadcast the Pro Coder Show once a week on all kinds of channels like Rumble, LinkedIn, YouTube, and stuff. But you can also catch the replay if you go to podcast.procoder.io. You can subscribe there and catch it. And don't forget to run out and grab your copy of 12rules.io, actionable advice to accelerate your career. And I want to thank Don for coming on and I don't know, feels like a walk through history. So I hope you all have enjoyed that. And if you want more content like that, then give it a big thumbs up.
Well, thank you for having me, Greg. It's been fun. Hope we can do something sometime.
By the way, that's a fantastic shirt you're wearing there, Don. Don and I are both telling you to go out there and be professional.
This episode is over, but your code writing journey continues. Visit procoder.io to find links and resources to help you become a pro coder.